entrepreneurship, and invention, and this is funded through NSF. And featured here is our project team. Myself and Claire will be hosting the webinar today. And I'm going to pass it off to our speakers, Narcrisha Norman and Joel Schildbach. They are program directors from NSF's Directorate of STEM Education, and specifically within the Division of Graduate Education. And feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat. We'll respond to them every now and then, but we'll definitely have more dedicated time towards the end of the presentation for further Q&A. So now I'll pass it off to Narcrisha and Joel.
Hello, thank you all for joining us today. Dr. Schildbach and I, as Pamela mentioned, are going to talk to you all about the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, and we will get it going. So the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, there are a couple of ways to contact us. The website with the most information on it would be that www.nsfgrfp.org. For applicants to file for applications and stuff, you would go to that website, nsf.gov/grfp. The Graduate Research Fellowship Program is, of course, as mentioned, in the Director for STEM Education, and that's in the Division of Graduate Education. And we're not able to answer all your questions today, so any questions you might still have once we finish, please feel free to contact us at info@nsfgrfp.org, where we will follow up on any questions you might have. Next slide, please. So today we're going to do a general overview of GRFP. The most comprehensive we definitely go by, whether you're supporting students, interested in reviewing, or filing an application, you should look at the GRFP solicitation, which we'll probably mention a couple of times. Today we're going to give general information, a description. We're going to talk about eligibility, ineligible degree programs, ineligible fields of study, and proposed research, which is two different things actually in GRFP. We're going to do an overview of the application package and talk about review criteria. The overall goal for GRFP is to recruit individuals into STEM and into STEM fields. We want to select, recognize, and financially support early career individuals with demonstrated potential to be high-achieving scientists and engineers. We also want to broaden participation of the full spectrum of diverse talent that society has to offer, and this includes underrepresented and underserved communities. So this is kind of like a comprehensive, almost all-knowing slide for GRFP. GRFP is actually NSF's oldest program, or one of the oldest. It's been around since 1952. There's been over 70,000 fellowships awarded. We have fellows that have gone on to become Nobel laureates, more than 40 of those. We have fellows from or in every state. We have more than 450 fellows that have gone on to become members of the National Academy of Sciences, and so many fellows that have gone on to become part of such amazing activities that we couldn't include it all on this side. GRFP is a 5-year fellowship period. 3 of those years are financially supported with an annual stipend of that $37,000 and cost of education allowance that's in lieu of tuition and fees of $16,000 each year for those 3 years. The competition is we get about 12,000 or more than 12,000 applications. Of course, depending on the funding we are given, we give out usually more than 2,000 offers. So some of the benefits of GRFP, there's no postgraduate requirements. So there's no agreement after once you finished. We don't actually do anything else except maybe every once in a while let us know how you're doing. Another thing about our competition is we have over 500 academic institutions, this way of institutions that are represented. We have eligible major fields of study, and those are all those supported by NSF. This goes anywhere from chemistry, geosciences, STEM education and learning. And there's a lot of subfields under those major fields of study, but these are the major ones. Again, there's that website, nsfgrfp.org, for more information. What's also on that website is a decision tree, um, and eligibility questionnaire. So that's kind of an eligibility questionnaire where it lets you know, given your current wherever you are academically, if you're still eligible. So that's a good thing to check out. Another thing that's very important is the format compliance check. We talked about the percentage of applicants that actually make it through the competition. You will not make it through the competition if you don't pass that format compliance check. So you need to know about that. So we wanted you to submit early, and it's open to individuals pursuing research-based master's and doctoral degree programs in eligible fields of study. The reason for submitting early is if anything goes wrong with technology, you could work through those things, but you can't work through them if you miss the deadline. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the description. So as mentioned before, there are 3 years of stipend and cost of education allowance. This payment covers all your tuition and mandatory fees, so there's no cost to the student. This is paid to the academic institution. It goes through the academic institution before it reaches the student. So that's approximately $159,000. There are other opportunities within that 5-year period. So that's one of the reasons you get the 5 years. Say you did a year and then you did an intern, or 2 years and then you did an intern. You can add that to your 5 years and still be a fellow. Intern is non-academic internship program, and it pays pretty well. We also have our FASED, Individual with Disability Support, which is very helpful for those who need it, and our Career Life Balance Initiative for family leave, which a lot of our applicants actually, our fellows actually use. I mentioned before the solicitation, so that's NSF 24-591. If you're applying or helping someone apply, you should look at the newest solicitation for any changes that may have been made to the program. Next slide, please. So the fellowship is awarded to the individual, and so you have your choice of project advisor and graduate program, meaning you're bringing in your own funding. It's unrestricted, so there's no service requirement after completion, as I mentioned before, and it's portable, so it can be used at any accredited nonprofit U.S. institution of higher education with a campus in U.S. for research-based master's and doctoral degrees. So there's 3 years of funding. So say you finished your master's in a year or 2 years, you still have 1 year of funding. That portable means you could take that fellowship to another institution. Next slide, please. And now we'll get deeper into eligibility. So to be eligible, again, look at the NSF solicitation 24-591 for any updates for the concrete facts about GRFP. Be a U.S. citizen, national, or permanent resident early in your career. So we're looking for seniors and undergrad or those very fresh new graduate students. Pursuing research-based master's and doctoral degrees. No professional degrees. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're looking for those that go into STEM or STEM education. You have to be full-time enrolled to get the fellowship in your graduate degree program. And no foreign institutions, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but no foreign institutions. Yeah, we'll leave it that way. Can you go back a slide? Sorry. There are 4 levels actually for GRFP. 2 of those levels you can apply as long as you're at that level. So say you're a level 1, which means you're a senior, you have a bachelor's degree with no graduate study. As long as you have no graduate study yet, maybe you took a year off, you're still able to apply for GRFP until you actually start that first year. If you have, if you're in your first year, then that makes you a level 2 and you can only apply once. If you're a level 3, that makes your second year graduate student. You have no more than 1 year completed, and you can only apply once. Now that other one is level 4. That's if you're a returning graduate student, you have greater than 2 year interruption in your graduate study, then you can apply as long as you remain level 4. Next slide, please. So I talked about ineligible degree programs, and those are the professional degree programs, MBAs, DDS programs, MD, All that is in a solicitation in greater detail. There's also those joint degree programs, so MD, PhD, community global or public health, counseling or social work programs are all ineligible. Education programs are ineligible except STEM education, which is eligible. Humanities are also ineligible, except for the history of science. History of science degrees are eligible. Next slide, please. So the other part is ineligible areas of study and proposed research. This is research that's directly related to health or health-related goals. Usually National Institutes of Health support those. So we do not support those for GRFP. Those are treatment of disease, animal models, disease prevention, clinical research, patient-oriented research, and again, the full list is in the solicitation. Also, outcomes research is not supported for GRFP. Those are treatment of therapy, intervention, advocacy for specific policy outcomes, not supported. Applied research on plant pathology is not supported. Impacts on food safety, also not supported. And again, check out the solicitation for the full list. And now I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Schildbach to talk more about the application package.
Thank you, Dr. Norman. So if you've determined that you're going to be or are in an eligible program and that your proposed research is eligible, you of course need to think about the application package, and we're going to discuss that in some detail here. Okay. There are multiple parts to the application. I should note, and this may just be a reminder, that the application opens up over the summer and the applications are due mid-October. And as Dr. Norman mentioned, details like this would appear in the solicitation. Okay, so when the application portal opens up, you would go to research.gov. If you need to, you would establish an account and then you could start your application. And about the first thing you're going to see is this form that is like, you've all applied to college and a variety of other things. So it's what you would expect. So you put in your personal information about your education, your experience, your proposed major field of study, honors, awards, publications, things of that nature. And that's probably the most straightforward part of the application. Then there are a couple of statements that you would be required to complete and upload. There is the personal relevant background and future goals statement, which I'll refer to hereafter as the personal statement, and then the graduate research statement. And then, as you might expect, transcripts are required, as are letters of reference. Now, for this year, a month ago is when all those deadlines hit. And as you'll note in the solicitation, and you need to check the solicitation every year because the deadlines are updated, you're going to find out when the precise deadline is, and the deadline for you in particular is based upon the field of study that you select. And so this year we started off with chemistry, geosciences, math, and physical sciences. Next day it was life sciences, and then engineering, and then we finished up the week with computer science, materials research, social sciences, and whatnot. One thing to keep in mind is that if for any reason you need accessibility accommodations, you can email our operations center at info@nsfgrfp.org to register the needed accommodations and request them, but you need to do that at least 4 weeks before the application deadline so that we can get those in place. Okay. starting with this year, and I imagine it's going to continue into the future, the reference letters are going to be due before the application is due. Only a few days, but you need to make sure that your reference writers know this and get the letters in. You may wonder about the timing, but as part of the whole process, you input the names and contact information for your letter writers, and an email will go out well in advance of the deadline, whenever you complete that and indicate that it's finalized. So those reference letters will come back in. Then the next week is when all of those deadlines fall. Then, as far as this timeline goes, if you are a level 1, that is, you are finishing up your undergraduate education, or you are between earning your bachelor's degree and starting in a graduate program, you need to make sure to apply to graduate schools, because one of the absolute requirements of this fellowship is that you start a graduate program, an eligible graduate program, in the fall of the year in which you were offered the fellowship. Now, the fellowship offers go out late March, early April, and fellows or prospective fellows are given a few weeks to decide whether or not they're going to accept. And the fellowship year begins in that September. Okay, a little bit more detail about those two statements. Now, the personal statement. This is 3 pages, and I think of it as the place where you get to tell your story. So what is your potential for STEM research, and what in your education and in your activities, what have you done that demonstrates you have this potential? So you'll talk about your personal and your professional experiences and how they contributed to your motivation for pursuit of a STEM career. So you talk about things like career aspirations, your future goals, the particulars of the experience, what it was, how did you get recruited to it, or how did you apply for it, what was your role, and one thing that's important in all of this is not only how it shaped you, but what about this project fired you up? Why was it worth doing? And it's always important to show sort of these things on different scales. So not only what precisely you were doing, but also how did it fit into the whole, and ideally, how did it contribute to the broader field that you are working in? Now, one thing that we need to underscore here, because this is in the solicitation and it is an absolute requirement, in these 2 statements, the personal statement and the research statement, you need to have sections in them, and they will each be their individual sections. They are marked by headers, and in each one of these sections, you would address one of the National Science Foundation's merit review criteria. And those are intellectual merit and broader impacts. So at a minimum, in these 2 statements, you're going to have 2 areas, and you're going to have separate headings that address these review criteria. But we're going to talk a bit more about the review criteria in a little bit. Now, the research statement. This is where you would identify a research problem or a research question, and then you've got 2 pages here to outline how you would attack it. So, you want to note its importance. Again, why is it worth doing? and then you will say how you would address it. Now, it's important to realize that this is not some sort of contract. Now, when you submit a research proposal to, for example, NSF, you're kind of entering into a contract where you say, hello, funding agency, if you give me this money, I will do the following experiments. That's not the situation here. This is not an outline of precisely what you're going to do if you get the funding, because, you know, if you're a level 1 student, if you are still an undergraduate, you can't predict where you're going to be going, what, you know, who your thesis advisor will be, any of that. So instead, this is a statement, a couple of pages long, where you kind of get a show off to demonstrate to the reviewers that, you know, I've done some studying, I'm prepared to do this, I can identify a question, and I can come up with a sensible path through which I would be able to, you know, get an answer. So you would start off by communicating, you know, some sort of broad field, and then what is your particular question, and then you would explain your research plan, your methods, what you would expect to learn, and then, you know, future goals, what future steps, what would you do next? 2 pages long, so you don't have a lot of space. You can do things like include figures and whatnot, but keep in mind a few things. You want to make your contributions clear, right? So if this is of your own creation, that's great. If it's based upon some work that you did in somebody's lab, you should make that, you should have approval to use this in your research statement, but you also should make that clear. When you describe it, you want to avoid jargon, and you want to communicate clearly for non-specialists. Now, you might say, why am I talking to non-specialists here? I thought reviewers would be experts. Well, they are, but they may not have a deep experience or knowledge in precisely what you're doing, what you're proposing to do. They will have broad experience in the area. They will have an advanced degree in that area, but they may not know the particulars of what you're proposing. So you want to make sure that the information is accessible, you know, without great preparation in the particular area. So you want to avoid the jargon, you want to communicate clearly. Doing these things will help you avoid upsetting your reviewers, which is, you know, upsetting your reviewers is generally not a good thing. Okay. A couple of more things that are left for the application. One would be the reference letters. In the application module, you have the space to list up to 5 reference writers. Now, you need to list a minimum of 3. And in order for your application to go into review, 2 letters have to be received. Because of that, because this is high stakes, right? So if you list 3 people and 2 of them fail to produce a letter for, you know, whatever reason, your application would not be reviewed. So what we strongly recommend is that you approach people who can write a reference letter, and you secure, you know, approval from 5 different people, and you list them in the application, but you want to list them in the order in which you think their letter would contribute to your application. So if you've worked extensively with somebody and they have a really good idea about your motivations and your work ethic and you know, your preparation, you'd want them at the top. But if somebody doesn't know you quite as well, you would put them further down on the list. And the way it works is that If 3 letters come in, that's great. They all get pulled into the application. If more than 3 come in, the system is set up so that of those that come in, the top 3 that you provide of those that come in are pulled into the application. So if 4 or 5 come in, only 3 will be selected, but it'll be the top 3 according to the ranking that you gave them. Okay. Now, moving on to transcripts. Transcripts are required. So at a minimum, all of our applicants are going to be submitting a transcript from the school that they're at earning their bachelor's degree, or from which they've earned their bachelor's degree. But there may be more transcripts required. So for example, if you've attended more than one institution and were enrolled in a degree granting program, right? So that doesn't mean study abroad. That doesn't mean taking a couple of courses over the summer or something. But if you, for example, started off in a community college, or if you started off in one institution and got halfway through your bachelor's and then switched to another, you would need transcripts for all of those. Further, if you're applying while you are a graduate student, you also would need to have a transcript from the graduate institution. Now, official or unofficial transcripts, both are accepted. You absolutely must have something from the graduate school that you're in if you are applying while you are a graduate student, even if you just started. So we recommend, especially if you're a second-year graduate student at time of application, that you go ahead and get an official transcript, at least for the graduate, for your graduate application, or from your graduate program, rather. Okay. So well, as you're preparing this, it's good to understand what the reviewers are going to be doing when they're reviewing. What is it that they're looking for? And so we asked them to engage in a comprehensive review using the review criteria that have been established by the National Science Board, which oversees the National Science Foundation. Those 2 review criteria, which I mentioned before, intellectual merit and broader impacts. Now, intellectual merit, as defined normally, and this is for all like research grants, it would be how important is the proposed activity to advancing knowledge within its own field or across different fields. And broader impacts, how well does the proposed activity benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? For the purposes of the fellowship application, the proposed activity is funding the applicant's graduate education. So again, we tell the reviewers to engage in a comprehensive review, looking for demonstrated potential for significant achievement in STEM. So it's the potential that they're looking for, not, what you've done so far, and it's some sort of award for, what the research you've already done, or, the publications you already have. It's meant to be focused on what you've done so far, projects or, indicates that you're going to be doing in the future. And they're asked to give a balanced consideration to all components of the application. So yes, they're going to look at the transcripts, but they're going to look at the letters, and they're going to look at the statements. All of it is going to be considered. So when it comes to intellectual merit, there are some things there that it's going to be obvious to you that they're going to be looking for. So the reviewers are going to be looking for demonstrated intellectual ability. If they look at your transcripts, do you have an academic preparation that makes sense? Do you have decent grades? Have you published anything? Have you done research and then presented the research in public or in some sort of research forum? What's the evidence that you can plan and conduct research, work with others, or work on your own? Anything that provides evidence of the ability to take initiative or to solve problems. And does what you outline make sense in terms of preparing you to do what you indicate are your future plans for your career? And again, they're going to be looking throughout the application for this information, the personal statement, the research plan, letters, everything. Now, the broader impacts, remember, this is the potential impact of funding the applicant and the potential impact on research or on society. So that could include any number of things, and it's up to the applicant to define what the broader impacts are. So it might be efforts to increase the participation of the full spectrum of diverse talent in STEM. So what have you done to, bring different viewpoints to the field, or would funding you provide a different viewpoint than the standard in terms of, the particular field? Maybe you've engaged in mentoring or done something to improve STEM education in schools or improve the public's scientific literacy. Anything that you've done to have an impact on the field or on society can be included in this. Again, it is up to you to define it. And also, again, it's going to be, there's going to be evidence of this throughout the application. Okay, so we've got some suggestions here in the last few slides, things that we would encourage you to do. So first of all, start early. When that solicitation comes out in the summer, go through it. You can sort of warm up by looking at this year's solicitation, but you need to make sure that you're looking at the one for the year that you're applying in, because some things do change. And you want to make sure that you understand, what they're looking for, any issues with eligibility, all of that stuff. You want to get into research.gov, you want to get in there and you want to access the application module when it opens up and familiarize yourself with what's required. You want to make sure that you've asked the people who you would like to provide reference letters. You want to ask them well in advance. So in 2024, the due date was October 11th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So we would recommend that, a month or more out, you would have secured their permission and determined their willingness to provide a letter. And then you want to get the names and the email addresses in that application and get them sent out so that they have plenty of warning and plenty of lead time. You want to follow that up with reminders and make sure that they understand that those reference letters are due before the application deadline. Other things that you need to do. So you take a look at that solicitation, check the deadline for your major field of study. Make sure you understand that. The major fields of study are indicated there in the solicitation, and they all have subfields. So you need to make sure you select the right one, not only so that you get the right application deadline, but also there are some restrictions. At least for the first year of your graduate program, you need to be in that major field of study. So if you apply in engineering, you can't then pop up, the next fall and say, oh, by the way, I meant history of science. It doesn't work that way. you cannot change your major field of study after you submit. Now, regarding the statements, again, make sure you've got separate headings for broader impacts and intellectual merit. And those sections have to appear in both the research and personal statements. Don't try to jam them together. Don't combine them with anything else. Don't start that in the middle of a sentence, because that's not a header. So we need to do that to make sure, the reason why this is a rule is to make sure that the reviewers can find it. Okay, so it is a rule, it's in the solicitation. If you don't do it or do some variation on it, you risk having your application found non-compliant and having it returned without review. So to help avoid that, in the application module, you will find templates that you can download, and you can actually work within those, and that should ensure proper formatting and that you've got these headers in place. We strongly recommend that you don't take the submission from your buddy from a previous year and use that as your template, because things have changed and that could actually lead to problems. A couple of things, this may seem like it's in the weeds, but know what your academic history is and what it actually says on the transcripts, because if there's any questions about eligibility or compliance, we go to the transcripts. The transcripts were generated by your institution. They were done by the registrar. If you know any registrars, you know they don't like improvise. So they're real sticklers. So that's what we go to. That's the official record. So if you want to make sure that you enter the right dates and everything in your as it's indicated on your transcript, when you put the description of your education in that form, and you want to make sure that you understand what's on the transcripts, and then your application is done to be compliant. So, for example, you may think that you've got a fall start date indicated on your transcript, but it may actually indicate a summer start or a spring start, and that could cause problems with compliance. So best to just take a look at the actual record and understand what's in there. Now, we want to mention one thing on our way out here. Every year, as Dr. Norman mentioned, there have been a couple of thousand offers made. Those applications that are deemed meritorious but miss the funding cutoff are awarded honorable mentions. And that's definitely something that you can put on your CV. It's understood to mean something. But now it also can come, at least in a way, with some funding. And that is that there is a program that has been started, and it allows for institutions from certain states, these are EPSCoR states, they receive less than a certain threshold of federal funds on an annual basis. So institutions in these EPSCoR states can apply for funding to fund graduate students at their institutions. Okay, so if a student, and this is upcoming, it's not quite, it'll be here in the future, for those who apply and are awarded honorable mentions, it will be possible for them to look to see if there are any slots available at EPSCoR states through this new EGFP program, the EPSCoR Graduate Fellowship Program, that would be open to, those who are holding honorable mentions. And so the funds would go to those institutions. They would then select who would receive them. But it's a pathway. It's a way to get funding if you have been awarded an honorable mention. So here we've got the solicitation number listed, but I believe the system will be set up so that those who have received an honorable mention will be given instructions on how to then make themselves eligible and then search for funding through this EPSCoR Graduate Fellowship Program. Okie dokie. Then finally, if you know faculty who want to learn more about GRFP, one way to learn a lot about it and how to mentor students, through the process is to actually have them apply to become reviewers. So if you know faculty who you think would do a great job with reviewing, direct them to nsfgrfp.org/reviewers. And this is where they can submit an application to be considered to be a reviewer. And we're always looking for good people to review these applications. So finally, we got the program context again. We've got a lot of great information on our nsfgrfp.org website. That includes specific sections for applicants, for reviewers, and for people who are writing reference letters. Now, if you have technical problems in all of this, we've got we've got a couple of phone numbers there that you can call, but you can also send send questions to info@nsfgrfp.org. That is our operations center, and they should be able to provide you some guidance. And with that, I think I'm going to stop the share, and then we can take any questions if I've not managed to put everybody to sleep.
It doesn't look like we have anything in the chat, but I don't know if anyone had any
I put them to
questions.
sleep.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any questions or drop them in the chat.
Hi, could you talk more on honorable mention?
Do you want to take that, Dr. Norman, since you are the local expert
know about
and
that, but
global
I-
expert, to be honest?
I'll do my best. So what happens is there's certain policy and certain stipulations around GRFP that only allows us to fund so many GRFs. And so what we wanted to do was try to find a new way to get honorable mentions funded. And so what honorable mentions are is just the rest of the list of qualified applicants that we couldn't fund. I think that's the best way to describe it. So they are additionally highly competitive with the rest of the applicant pool. We just can't fund everybody. And so what we did was to create another fellowship program. And the reason why that one is a little bit different, it has quite a few differences for GRFP, but it kind of allows us to get those honorable mentions and give them another chance to apply. Some of the stipulations is that the array of schools is a little bit less selective. So instead of every single school, then you have those ones at EPSCoR jurisdictions. Now, some of the benefits of the ones at EPSCoR jurisdictions is some of them have very specialized research that students are actually looking for, like the University of Virgin Islands, just to say, has certain marine science programs that are very challenging and you may not be able to find in other places. So there's examples like that. Does that answer your question, or is there anything more specific we could try to answer?
No, that answers it. Thank you.
Mhm. Dr. Schildbach, are there any questions that they should be asking that maybe someone's not asking? What makes the application stick out in a crowd? That's a good one. What do you think?
I think those wherein someone's showing authenticity, showing it doesn't need to be big and flashy or whatever, but if an applicant convey their passion for the work, nobody should be looking to go to graduate school for some sort of backup. I mean, this is it should be the focus, and it should be clear that there is desire and there's passion there, and whatever you can do to convey that, I think helps you out. And reviewers, they kind of like stories, right? They're like anybody, they like a good narrative. And so, the people who are reviewing this are not these automatons that are, very rigid in their thinking. They like to see stories. They like to see somebody who is fired up about what they want to do. And when there's obvious care taken, and that there's consideration for the reviewer, if there are any figures, do the figures make sense, and actually are they a good use of the space? Is it clear and easy to read? Is it structured so that things make sense? You don't have to read and reread. All of that goes into a good application. I think can be helpful.
Yeah, I could add to that. If someone that, well, there are different levels in those applications, but someone that knows the science or has researched it in a way that it's clear what you're trying to describe, and that you thought about what happens if something goes wrong, because not all experiments go all the way through exactly as you think. So have you thought about what goes wrong? Have you thought about the equipment that you might need? So what helps is if you have some type of advisor or something that can maybe talk you through your idea, to help you kind of think about if it makes sense to someone else. You can do it in two ways. One, you can read it to your family, because most families don't quite know your research. You can see how confusing it is to them. But then also to your advisor, so then you can kind of get an idea what the middle ground is when someone's reading through it. The next application period is it's generally in October. You can't guarantee, but so far so good. It's been in October. The best way to know for sure is to check the whenever or if the newer solicitation comes out. Right, the most updated solicitation is what I should have said. Now, what goes bad is if you don't actually go to the website that we advised and look for that is templates on there that you can look at. So when you try to go rogue and create your own style, it's best to stick to the template that you don't have to stick to the one that we added, but that one is very good at showing you exactly what we're looking for to process your application, because if it goes outside of that, then it may not be eligible just because of that.
Yeah, every year there are applications that are turned away because they aren't submitted on time, or there's a problem with the formatting, or instructions weren't read, or somebody proposes bunch of experiments in something that's clearly not eligible. So understanding what's in the solicitation and figuring out how to craft your statements with that in mind, that's really important. But getting back to something that Dr. Norman said, it just reminded me, if you can take a complex subject and write a couple of pages about it and convince the reader that the reader knows what you're talking about, that's a huge thing, because I don't know how many times I've heard, oh, I didn't realize that, I thought I didn't know anything about this subject, but now, like, I'm such a genius. I completely understand what you just told me. And that goes a long way. If there's ways that you can get the reviewer to feel good about what you've written and convince the reviewer that the reviewer's a genius, it's always a good idea. So whatever you can do for the clarity, and that includes, like Dr. Norman suggested, if you can get your family to read it, and they may not have brilliant insights on the particular, experiments, but if they follow it, that's huge. That's huge for you.
I can tell you one thing that takes minutes off of my life, I think, is when you have a brilliant student that went through the whole application process, and we offered them a fellowship, but they only applied to one institution and did not get accepted at that institution, and now they cannot accept the fellowship. So please, 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 not only just apply to more than one institution, but also apply to more than one fellowship program. There are a lot of fellowships and scholarships. I say apply to everything. It's better to turn down something and say no thank you than to not have those different opportunities to select from. I could add another. There's also the fear of how competitive stuff is. Someone has to get those fellowships. Even if you don't get the fellowship and you use it for practice, it just helps build how you'll write as a scholar. But additionally, someone has to get them. So you can't guarantee, the only way to guarantee that you won't get it is if you don't apply.
A quick question.
Go ahead, please.
Is this applied for those who are in their last year of dissertation too? Or it's just for new students entering the graduate program?
For those students who are in a graduate program, you cannot, at time of the application deadline, you cannot have more than one full year of graduate study. So, and by full year, that would mean, because the applications generally fall during, land during that fall semester, that means that you could not have started before the previous fall. If you stepped out of a program and have been out more than 2 years and are applying before you come back in, then that would be, you would be eligible. But if you've had more than 1 year in a graduate program and are in one currently, then no, you would not be eligible.
Well, one thing you could do is go to nsf.gov and do a funding search, and you search for where you are academically, and there could be other opportunities at NSF outside of GRFP that you may be eligible for.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, that was our last question. Thank you so much, Narcrisha and Joel, for stepping in. Oh, we have one last question. I don't know if you guys want to tackle it before we hop off.
I can. I think Joel had to go.
Yes. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thanks.
Nicholas, your question is very specific. And it could go in a couple of different directions. So the best thing to do would be to detail it a little bit more and go to that email address, info. Do we have it? Info. I can put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Because that's the best way for us to answer very specific questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And while she's getting the email address, we also wanted to share that we do have a survey that Claire just also dropped in the chat as well. Please take the time to complete it so we can improve future webinars coming up. Thank you once again so much to Narcrisha and to Joel as well. I know he had to hop off to another meeting. And thank you all so much for joining us. We will be sharing the recording and slides afterwards, so please keep an eye out for that as well. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.